So today we're gonna make beef short ribs. It's the ribs of the animal cut near the breastbone. Now they're not as tender as a steak, but they got a ton more flavor. We're gonna cook them for a couple hours. By that time, they're gonna be melting your mouth tender. We're gonna serve it up with some buttery mashed potatoes and this red wine au jus on top. Ooh, I'm about to
bust just thinking about it.
Let's get into it. Here we go. This is one of my favorite beef dishes of all time. The first thing you need to do is go to the butcher and ask for English cut short ribs. Try and find some ribs that have a nice amount of meat on them. They're gonna shrink a little bit, so you gotta figure around 1 to 2 ribs per person. More often than not, the ribs are gonna come with a little bit of silver skin or fat on top. So what you wanna do is remove the silver skin. The fat's okay, it's gonna render out during the cooking process, but you do not want that silver skin. You want seasoning to be able to penetrate into the meat. Once the short ribs are cleaned up a little bit, this is optional, but I recommend drizzling a little bit of olive oil over the meat. It'll help the seasoning stick to the short ribs. Next, we're going to generously season with salt and pepper on all sides. Now you can add a little bit of garlic powder or onion powder. I like to keep it simple with just salt and pepper. You're going to infuse a ton of flavor while it's braising. Set the ribs aside, and now we're going to work on cutting up our mirepoix. We need about 3 to 4 ribs of celery for this recipe. Wash and rinse your celery, cut off the ends, and slice into little 1/4-inch pieces. In all honesty, the size of the celery doesn't matter too much. We're going to strain the au jus later on and make a beautiful gravy. Place the chopped celery in a bowl and set aside. Next, let's move on to slicing our carrots. Make sure to wash and rinse the carrots, then cut off the ends. Now I want to use the carrots in the final plating of the dish, so what I'm going to do is cut into little 1/4-inch slices on a bias. This will allow the carrots to hold its shape after braising for a few hours. Place the carrots in a bowl and set aside. Now let's move on to slicing up our onions. I like to use 1 large sweet onion, but Spanish onions work just as well. Slice the ends off the onion and cut it in half. Peel and slice with the grain, not against the grain. Also, if you can find them, you can optionally add 1 sliced leek and it'll give a lot of flavor as well. I recommend adding the onions to a separate bowl because you're going to caramelize them first before you add the celery and the carrots. So for me personally, the more garlic, the better. We're going to take about 4 or 5 garlic cloves, crush them with the knife, and peel them. You can keep the garlic cloves whole since they're going to break down while braising. Now let's move on to searing our short ribs. In a large Dutch oven on medium-high heat, add about 2 to 3 tablespoons of vegetable oil or canola oil. Now before you guys go crazy in the comments, I'm using olive oil only because I forgot to buy vegetable oil. Olive oil has a low smoke point. It's recommended to use a high smoke point oil when searing, like vegetable oil or canola oil. Sear all sides of the short ribs for about 2 to 3 minutes aside. This will get you a good Maillard reaction and a ton of flavor. Once you have good caramelization, remove the short ribs from the Dutch oven and reduce the heat to medium. Next, add your onions, season with salt and pepper, and caramelize to release the sweetness in the onions. Once your onions are caramelized, you can add your carrots, celery, and garlic. Saute your vegetables for about 5 to 7 minutes, then move the vegetables to the side and add 2 tablespoons of tomato paste to the bottom of the pot. Make sure you cook out the tomato paste to add some additional flavor. Then incorporate into the vegetables. Next, we have to add some red wine. I like using a Cabernet for this recipe. I recommend you choose a wine that you like to drink. Don't go for the inexpensive bottle just because you're cooking with it. We need to use about a half a bottle for this recipe, and you can drink the other half, so enjoy it. Let the wine simmer for about 3 to 5 minutes, then we're going to add some fresh herbs. This next step is optional, but I like to tie up the herbs in a little bit of butcher twine. It makes it easier to fish out later on. We're going to add 1 bunch of fresh thyme on top of the butcher twine, and you can optionally add some rosemary as well if you'd like. Tie the butcher twine like you're tying your shoes, but instead of making a bow, double loop it, creating a knot. Next, add 2 to 3 bay leaves to the pot and give it a stir. At this point, we're ready to add the seared short ribs back to the pot. Make sure you nestle the short ribs bone side down all the way to the bottom. Now we're going to cover with about 4 cups of beef stock. Now the amount of stock isn't as important. You just want to make sure it covers 3/4 of the way up the short ribs. Next, season with a little more salt and pepper and then place in the oven set to 325 degrees for around 2.5 to 3 hours. While our short ribs are braising, we're going to work on making our mashed potatoes. Now if I have a choice, I like to use russet potatoes over Yukon Golds. Make sure you wash and peel your potatoes. If you're wondering why I'm using my knife to peel my potatoes, I lost my potato peeler. I have no clue where it is. If you can, use the correct tool for the job. Cut your potatoes in half and then into little 1 to 2 inch pieces. The key here is just to make sure they're all the same size. Next, we're going to bring some water to a boil and generously season with salt. Carefully add your potatoes to the water along with 4 to 5 garlic cloves. Boil the potatoes till they're soft and you can stab them with a fork, then drain and place back in the pot. Next, we're going to add a stick of butter to our potatoes along with a half a cup of milk. Mash your potatoes either using a ricer or a potato masher until smooth. If the potatoes are a little too dry, feel free to add a little more milk a little at a time until you reach the right consistency and texture. Season the mashed potatoes generously with salt and pepper. Make sure you taste the potatoes, then adjust the salt and pepper to your liking, and that's our garlic butter mashed potatoes. If you're looking for another option, this dish also goes well with a creamy polenta. So at this point, our short ribs have been braising for 3 hours. I like to test for tenderness by poking a short rib with a skewer, and if it goes in like butter, they're done. For presentation, I try and pull the short ribs just before they're falling off the bone. Now we gotta do something with all that wonderful juice on the bottom of the pot. In a medium saucepan on medium heat, strain all the juice from the pot in a double mesh strainer or chinois. Separate the carrots and the vegetables, making sure not to throw them away. Bring the au jus to a gentle simmer. Next, in a separate small bowl, add 1 tablespoon of cornstarch and 2 tablespoons of cold water. Whisk the cornstarch and water together, creating a slurry. Add the cornstarch slurry a little at a time and immediately stir. Repeat the process until you get a nice gravy consistency. Season to taste with salt and pepper, and that's your gravy. Now we're almost ready to plate these beautiful short ribs up. This is optional, but I like to chop up some fresh parsley. I think it brings a lot of color, and it's a great garnish for this dish. Now the moment we've all been waiting for. Let's get ready to plate this up. I like to use a wide rim bowl, add some of your mashed potatoes to the bottom, followed by a beautiful piece of short rib with the bone attached. Place it right on top of your mashed potatoes, bone side down. Then add 4 to 5 carrot slices to the side of the mashed potatoes, followed by some of that beautiful, silky, red wine gravy on top of your short rib. I like to add enough gravy so it just barely covers the bottom of the bowl. Lastly, garnish with some chopped parsley, a fresh sprig of thyme, clean up the plate a little bit, and enjoy. So there you have it, that was our short ribs. Please, 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 you guys have to try this recipe. It's so easy. You just pop them in the oven, you go about your day for a couple hours, and when you come back home, you have incredible tender beef, you got a silky, flavorful au jus that you can put over your mashed potatoes. You're really doing yourself a disservice if you don't try this. Leave me a comment below, let me know what you want to see me cook next. If you enjoyed this video or you learned something, give us a like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.